Hello, students. Nowadays, we are reading the lesson The Birth. It is the seventh chapter from your snapshot book by A.J. Cronin. And in our previous video, we had studied that doctor whose name was Andrews mentioned he was horrified to see the stillborn child. Um, and his face chilled suddenly when he saw the stillborn, the lifeless body of the child. And there were two options before him whether to attend the child or save the mother who was in critical condition. And blindly he gave the child to the nurse and turned his attention to the Susan Morgan. And she lay collapsed, almost pulseless. She was still under the effect of either. Mm, and he gave an injection and worked fervently until her heart strengthened. And then he realized that she was safe. And then he called the midwife and he asked about the child. And midwife, she had placed the child under the bed. And then doctor knelt down and he pulled out the baby from the bed, from under the bed. So what happened after that, we will study in the story now. So move on the story, next para. Still kneeling, Andrew stared at the child with a haggard frown. The whiteness meant only one thing: aspecia pallida, and his mind, unnaturally tense, raced back to a case he once had seen in Samaritan, to the treatment that had been used instantly. He was on his feet and he was still kneeling. He was in the sitting position, and Andrew was looking at the child with a haggard frown. He was very tense at that time, and he was unwell. And the whiteness mean the body of the child was white, and that whiteness meant one thing, and that is aspecia pallida. And what is the meaning of aspecia pallida? Aspecia pallida, it is the unconsciousness due to lack of oxygen. So and his mind unnaturally tense, because he had promised to both of the couple that everything will be well. So he thought back, he raised back to a case. He thought about a case he once had seen in Samaritan, to treatment that had been used instantly. He was on his feet, and he remembered a case before, and the same case, as he was handling the same case, and the treatment, he remembered about the treatment. So he instantly he got up on his feet and he said, "Give me hot water and cold water." He threw out to the nurse and basins to, "Quick, quick." And he said, he threw out to the nurse means he spoke loudly to the nurse that, "Get me hot water and cold water, and two basins too, one basin for hot water and second for cold water, and do quick, quick." He spoke loudly. But doctor, she faltered, her eyes on the pallid body of the child. But nurse said, "But doctor," and she faltered. She faltered means she hesitated. She hesitated by looking the pallid body. Pallid means very pale due to poor health and of the child. But the doctor shouted, "Quick!" Snatching a blanket, he laid the child upon it and began the special method of respiration. And then he took a blanket and then he laid the child upon the blanket and began special treatment, a special method of respiration. He remembered a case before. Then the basins arrived, the ewer and big iron kettle, and the basins and ever is a large jug, and big iron kettle was brought there were brought there. Frantically he splashed cold water into one basin, and into the other he mixed water as hot as his hand could bear. So he poured down the cold water into the one basin and the hot water into the other another second basin, and then like a crazy juggler he hurried the child between the two, now plunging it into the icy, now into the steaming bath. And what happened then? He put the child into the cold water, icy water, and then into the steaming bath, into the hot water. And like a crazy juggler, he repeated this action again and again. He put that in the cold water, then into the hot, then into the cold, then into the hot, and this process was continuously he was doing. And 15 minutes passed. Sweat was now running into Andrew's eyes, blinding him. One of his sleeves hung down, dripping. His breath came pantingly, but no breath came from the lax body of the child. 15 minutes passed. He was continuously doing that process for 15 minutes. Sweat was now running into Andrew's eyes, blinding him, and he was wet of the sweat and perspiration, and one of his sleeves hung down, dripping. That sleeves was also dripping into the water, and but he didn't care about that. And his breath came pantingly because he was so tired, and pantingly, very gasping, he was taking breath, a long deep breath, but no breath came from the lax body of the child. But that child, that lax body, that lifeless body, there is no breath in them, in that. A desperate sense of defeat pressed on him, raising hopelessness, and a desperate sense of defeat, and he thought that he was defeated, because there is no breath in that lifeless body. He was trying hard, but hopelessness was raising into him, inside of him. He felt the midwife watching him in stark consternation while they are pressed back against the wall where she had all the time remained, her hand pressed to her throat, uttering no sound, her eyes burning upon him, was the old woman. And a desperate sense defeat her pressed on him, a raising hopelessness was raising in him. He felt the midwife watching him, and midwife means nurse was watching him in stark consternation. Consternation means very anxiety, very complete anxiety. She was watching doctor, what was the doctor doing, and there is no result, no positive result of doctor's action. When they are pressed back against the wall where she had all the time remained, and the nurse was in standing position, and she was looking on the doctors, and she all the time she remained um, against the wall, and her hands pressed her throat, and she pressed her throat by her hands, uttering no sound. She was stopping herself by sounds because she wanted to burst out. She wanted to weep. Her eyes burning upon him. Burning upon him means the looking intently. She was looking to the doctor intently, and the old woman, the another woman was the old woman. She remembered her longing for a grandchild as great as had been her daughter's longing for the child. And the old woman, and he remembered about the old woman, and she was longing for grandchild very eagerly, as great as her daughters. Her daughters was also longing. Her daughter was also wishing a child, but the child was lax and child was lifeless, all dashed away now, futile, beyond remedy. And after doing a lot of effort, he became hopeless and all dashed now, futile, and everything was futile, vain, and there is useless. Every effort became useless, and there is no another remedy to do on that body. And the floor was now a draggled mess. Stumbling over a shopping towel, Andrew almost dropped the child, which was now wet and slippery in his hands like a strange white fish. And the floor was now draggled mess, means the floor was very dirty. There everything was scattering there, stumbling over the shopping towel, and he was stumbling over the shopping towel because shopping towel was wet, and Andrew almost dropped the child and to stumble there, and he almost dropped the child because the child was also slippery, because he was putting that into the cold water and then hot water, and like a strange fish, white fish, the child seemed. For mercy's sake, doctor, whimpered the midwife, it's stillborn. And then midwife said, the nurse said, she said to the doctor, for mercy's sake, for sake of God, it's stillborn, so leave it. It is dead. It is stillborn. Andrew did not heed her. Beaten, despairing, having labored in vain for half an hour, he still persisted in one last effort, rubbing the child with a rough towel, crushing and releasing the little chest with both of his hands, trying to get breath into that limp body. And doctor did not heed her. He did not care her words, and he was beaten, despairing, having labored in vain for half an hour. He was trying hard for half an hour. He still persisted one last effort, and he wanted to do one last effort. And what he had done, he had rubbing. He had rubbed the child with the rough towel and crushing and releasing the little chest. He both of his hand he pressed the little chest of the baby, and then released and then crushed and then released. That is the process of getting breath, trying to get breath into that limp body. That limp body he was trying to get breath, so he was doing different types of methods. Okay. And then, as by miracle, the pygmy chest, which his hands enclosed, gave a short, convulsive heave. Another and another. Andrew turned giddy. And then, as by the miracle, as by the magic, as by the miracle, the pygmy chest, the little chest which his hand enclosed, the chest which was enclosed by his hands, the doctor's hand, gave a short convulsive heave. And there is a short convulsive heave under his hands, doctor's hand. So another and another. There is a breath. Andrew turned giddy. Andrew turned giddy. Giddy means weak, faint, because he was so happy. It was the miracle, and he had achieved what he wanted. So the sense of life springing beneath his fingers after all that unveiling striving was so exquisite it almost made him faint. And when he realized that the breath into the body was coming, and he was achieving what he wanted. So he was so happy, that so strange, and so suddenly all this happened, that he almost made him faint. He redoubled his effort fervently, and he redoubled and doubled his efforts fervently. The child was gasping now, and then the child was gasping and taking breath, panting deeper and deeper. He was taking deep breath. A bubble of mucus came from one tiny nostril, and the bubble of mucus came from one teeny nostril of the baby, a joyful, iridescent bubble. And that bubble was iridescent, but that is joyful at that time. The limbs were no longer boneless, and now his organs were no longer boneless. Life came into the body, and the head no longer lay back spinelessly. Now his body got strength, and had no longer lay back spinelessly like before. The blanched skin was slowly turning pink, and then blanched skin, the white skin was slowly turning pink. Then equisitely came the child's cry, and then the child came. Suddenly, the child's cry came, and they were so happy, and he saved the child, and he saved the mother by his a lot of efforts, and by his hard work. Okay, now it is the end of today's paragraph, and it is the time of Hindi summary, and you have some questions here. You have three questions here. Okay, and you will do these questions. And this is your homework, today's homework too. Okay, and now it is the time of Hindi summary. Okay, तो स्टूडेंट्स, हमने कल इसमें पिछली वीडियो में ये पढ़ लिया था कि किस तरह से वो एक लाइफलेस बेबी पैदा होता है, और डॉक्टर कितना परेशान है। उसने पहले उसकी मदर को बचाया, और फिर उसने बच्चे को ढूंढा, बच्चा कहाँ है। नर्स ने उसको मरा हुआ समझ करके बेड के नीचे सरका दिया था, गीले अखबारों के बीच में। जब डॉक्टर को ये महसूस हुआ कि उसकी मदर अब बच जाएगी, वो सेफ़ है, आउट ऑफ डेंजर है, तो उसने फिर उस बच्चे को ढूंढा, वहाँ नीचे से निकाला, नीचे बैठ कर के उसको देख रहा है, और उसकी बॉडी बिल्कुल वाइट है, ब्लड का कलर नहीं है। तो वहाँ पर एक ये जो प्रॉब्लम होती है, ये एस्पीशिया पैलिडा कहते हैं इस चीज़ को मेडिकल साइंस में, और इसका मतलब होता है कि जो बच्चा है वो अनकॉन्शियस स्टेट में है, बाय लैक ऑफ ऑक्सीजन की कमी के कारण ऐसा होता है। जब ऑक्सीजन बॉडी को नहीं मिल पाती है, तो इस तरह की अनकॉन्शियसनेस उसके अंदर थी। डॉक्टर को तुरंत याद आया एक ऐसा ही केस उसने पहले देखा था, जिसका ट्रीटमेंट होते हुए उसने तुरंत नर्स को कहा कि जल्दी से गर्म पानी और ठंडा पानी लेकर आओ, 2 बेसिन लेकर के आओ, 2 बाउल लेकर के आओ, और जल्दी करो। और जो नर्स है वो कह रही है, लेकिन डॉक्टर वो हेसिटेट कर रही है। वो कह रही है ये तो पैलिड बॉडी है, तो वीक लैक्स निर्जीव बॉडी है। लेकिन डॉक्टर चिल्लाता है इसके ऊपर, कोई जल्दी करो। फिर डॉक्टर ने एक ब्लैंकेट लिया, और उस ब्लैंकेट के ऊपर बच्चे को लिटा दिया, और फिर स्पेशल मेथड जो है रेस्पिरेशन का उसको यूज करने लगा। तब तक बेसिन्स आ गए, और एक बड़े जग भी और कैटल वहाँ पर आ गई। डॉक्टर ने तुरंत एक बेसिन में ठंडा पानी डाला, एक में गर्म पानी डाला, और उसने फिर उस बच्चे को एक क्रेजी जगलर के जैसा, एक जादूगर की तरह, जैसे जादूगर होता है 2 बॉल उसके हाथ में होती है, उनको उछालता है, उसी तरह से डॉक्टर ने भी उस बच्चे को लिया, और एक बार ठंडे पानी में डालता था, फिर दूसरी बार गर्म पानी में डालता था, और ऐसा वो बार बार कर रहा है। और इस सारे प्रोसेस को करते करते 15 मिनट्स बीत गए। डॉक्टर पूरी तरह से पसीने में तर हो गया, और पसीना उसकी आंखों के आगे आ रहा है। उसकी एक जो स्लीव है बाँह है कम जो उसकी वो भी खुल गई है, वो नीचे पानी में डूब रही है और डॉक्टर हाँफ रहा है। लेकिन उस बच्चे के अंदर उस लैक्स बॉडी जो है, लाइफलेस बॉडी, उसके अंदर कोई भी ब्रीथ नहीं आ रही। डॉक्टर अब डेस्परेट होता जा रहा है, उसको लग रहा है कि वो हार गया है, उसके अंदर होपलेसनेस जो है वो बढ़ रही है। और उसको लगता है कि मिडवाइफ जो नर्स है वो उसको देख रही है बड़े एंजाइटी के साथ। और उसने अपने गले पर हाथ रखे हुए हैं, वो बर्स्ट रोना चाहती है लेकिन किसी तरह से अपनी आवाज़ को उसने दबा रखा है। और ऐसा डॉक्टर देखता है, उसकी आंखें बर्निंग अपॉन उस पर बहुत ही उसको इंटेंटली देख रही हैं कि डॉक्टर के एक्शन को डॉक्टर क्या कर रहा है। फिर वो उस ओल्ड वुमेन के बारे में सोचता है, उसको याद आता है कि वो ओल्ड वुमेन जो है उसका वो ग्रैंड चाइल्ड है। और उसकी कितनी इच्छा है उसको ग्रैंड चाइल्ड होने की। और उसकी मदर की भी के बारे में भी सोचता है, जिनका 20 साल की शादी के बाद पहली बार बच्चा हो रहा था। और डॉक्टर ने उनको प्रॉमिस किया था सब कुछ ठीक रहेगा, लेकिन ये सारी मेहनत बेकार जा रही है, बिल्कुल फुटाइल हो गई है, बिल्कुल यूजलेस हो गई है। अब कोई आगे रेमेडी बची नहीं है उसको करने के लिए। और डॉक्टर ये सारा सेंस को, ये सारा समझते सोचते हुए बहुत ही डेस्परेट हो रहा है, निराश हो रहा है। और पूरा फर्श जो है वो गंदा है और वहाँ पर बहुत सारी चीज़ें बिखरी पड़ी हैं। और डॉक्टर उसमें स्टम्बल करता है, लड़खड़ा जाता है एक शॉपिंग टॉवल के ऊपर। एक गीला टॉवल है, उसके ऊपर डॉक्टर का पैर पड़ता है, फिसलने ही वाला होता है, लगभग उसने बच्चे को गिरा ही दिया होता। और इस तरह से, क्योंकि वो बहुत फिसलन वाला, बहुत गीला है बच्चा, बार बार पानी में डाल के बिल्कुल स्लिपरी हो गया है फिश की तरह, तो उसको हैंडल करना बड़ा मुश्किल हो रहा है। मिडवाइफ जो है, नर्स जो है, वो बड़ी आश्चर्यचकित है कि डॉक्टर कर क्या रहा है, बच्चा मरा हुआ है फिर भी क्यों इतना अफर्ट कर रहा है। वो कहती है, फॉर मर्सी शेक डॉक्टर, इट इज़ स्टिल बॉर्न, स्टिल बॉर्न है, ये मरा हुआ है, ये नहीं जी सकता, क्या कर रहे हैं आप। लेकिन डॉक्टर ने उसकी तरफ कोई ध्यान नहीं दिया, वो अपनी कोशिश करता रहा। भले ही आधे घंटे से उसकी सारी कोशिशें बेकार जा रही हैं, लेकिन फिर भी वो एक लास्ट एफर्ट करना चाहता है। उसने बच्चे को एक रफ टॉवल से रगड़ना शुरू किया और उसकी छाती पर अपने दोनों हाथ रख कर के उसको दबाया, फिर रिलीज किया, फिर क्रश किया, फिर रिलीज किया। इस तरह से, जिस तरह से सांस उसको आए, इसलिए कोशिश कर रहा है, दोनों हाथों से ट्राई कर रहा है उसकी लिम्प बॉडी को दोनों हाथों से दबा दबा करके किसी तरह से वो जो सफोकेशन है वो दूर हो और उसको सांस आए। और तभी एक मिरेकल होता है, एक चमत्कार होता है कि वो जो छोटी सी चेस्ट है उसके अंदर एक झटका लगा, एक सांस लेने की एक संकेत मिले। और एक के बाद दूसरा, दूसरे के बाद तीसरा, और इस तरह से धड़कन चलने लगी, सांस वो लेने लगा। और एंड्रयू डॉक्टर जो है वो ये देखकर लगभग मूर्छित ही हो गया था, क्योंकि अचानक इतनी बड़ी खुशी जिसको वो इतनी देर से एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा था, वो अचानक उसको लगा कि उसके हाथों के नीचे लाइफ उछल रही है। और वो लगभग फेंट ही हो गया था अचानक ऐसी खुशी को देख करके। उसने अपने एफर्ट्स को डबल किया, जल्दी जल्दी करने लगा, और चाइल्ड भी अब गैस्पिंग करने लगा, बच्चा सांस लेने लगा डीपर डीपर, और ज़्यादा गहरा सांस लेने लगा, और ज़्यादा गहरा। और फिर एक उसकी छोटे से नॉस्ट्रिल से, उसके जो नाक से एक छोटा सा म्यूकस का बबल निकला। और ये इरिडिसेंट बबल था, बबल जो नॉस्ट्रिल से म्यूकस होता है इरिडिसेंट होता है, लेकिन ये जॉयफुल था उस समय, क्योंकि इसके बाहर आते ही बच्चा सांस लेने लगा। और उसकी जो बॉडी थी अब वो बोनलेस नज़र नहीं आ रही थी, क्योंकि अब वो सांस लेने लगा था, ऑक्सीजन उसकी ब्लड में जाने लगा, और उसकी बॉडी जो है वो वाइट से अब पिंक होने लगी। और अब उसकी गर्दन भी लटकी हुई नहीं थी, क्योंकि उनमें जान आने लगी, उसके अंगों में जान आने लगी। और इस तरह से फिर थोड़ी देर बाद बच्चे की क्राई, बच्चे के रोने की आवाज़ आई। और इतनी देर से जो डॉक्टर एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा था, उस बच्चे को बचाने की कोशिश कर रहा था, आखिरकार उसने बच्चे को बचा दिया अपने एक लॉट ऑफ एफर्ट से, अपनी बहुत मेहनत से। उसने उसकी माँ को भी बचा लिया और बच्चे को भी बचा लिया। और डॉक्टर इतना खुश है बहुत ज़्यादा। उसको ये कहा गया, राइटर कहता है कि वो गिडी मतलब मूर्छित ही होने वाला, इतने खुशी उसको मिली अचानक। तो इस तरह से आज की ये वीडियो यहीं एंड होती है। ओके, थैंक यू। आपको जो क्वेश्चंस दिए हैं इस चैप्टर के लास्ट में, आप उनको करेंगे। ओके, थैंक यू।